Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Top Talk guest webinar session. Hi, Vicky. I know you're in the wings. How are you doing?
Hiya, I'm here. I'm
Excellent.
fine.
That's good. I'm really glad to hear. Thank you so much for joining us. This is something we've tried to do, get you on to do for us for the last 6 months, but I've got you now. You're not going anywhere. So you're stuck with us for the next hour. So Vicky, before we get going, and before obviously, I know we've got a lot of images to look at and that you're going to discuss with everybody, just tell everybody kind of, your background in photography, how you got into it, and especially how you got into the digital art.
Okay, well, a long time ago, probably about 30 years ago, I went to an all-girls grammar school, very academic, and I'm not a very academic person, so I kind of threw myself into my art lessons, if you like, and I became really interested in portraiture very, very early on. And basically, I had a teacher that kind of recognised the sort of thing that I was into and really encouraged me. So luckily it didn't go unnoticed, and I had somebody to sort of push me along a little bit. So it all started really back then when oh God, about 30 years ago. Show me age now. So.
Well, I've met you, so I don't believe it. I don't believe
Yeah, right.
it. Excellent. So the digital art. So that was the next step, was it?
I went to Southampton to study photography and art, and whilst I was there, well, actually, the week that I started there was when Photoshop was first introduced onto the market, and so I started playing around with that whilst I was in Southampton, and I've kind of grown with it, if you like. When I was at college, nobody knew how to use it because it was literally just as it had come onto the market. And so as Photoshop's developed, I've kind of developed with it and sort of picked things up along the way. And I've had to teach myself because when I started, nobody knew how to use it. So I've kind of had to sort of learn the hard way, if you like.
Brilliant. Well, that was going to be one of the questions. Where did you start? And obviously, you've just kind of answered that anyway. So look, I know we've got a lot of images to look at. So I'm going to hand you the screen. So you'll be getting the message. I'll let you know when everybody can see it. So that should be coming over to you now,
Okay.
Vicky. And I just want to remind everybody while you're doing that, please ask questions for Vicky. So put that through the question panel. I'll be manning that for her. And we've got natural pauses within the presentation as well as question time at the end. Have you had that through on your end? There we go. So we're seeing you full screen. We can hear you loud and clear. So Vicky, it's all over to you.
Okay, lovely. Well, I've just already told you what I was going to start with. Basically, is that I started off at least 30 years ago doing this sort of thing. I started out doodling quite a lot. I spend hours with a drawing pad just sort of doodling sort of strange bits of art, which you'll see a bit later, and creating faces and sort of warping faces and manipulating faces and moving the features of the face around to sort of create strange looking characters. And I've had a fascination with doing that for years. Anyway, when I was at school, the teacher that I mentioned to you said that although I had a really good interest in portraiture, she felt that my images sometimes looked a little flat, and that perhaps I needed to think more about the way I was approaching things. And one of the things she said to me, which has stuck with me forever really, was that the face is just a mask which is protecting the person underneath. And those words have sort of rang true with every single person that I've ever met and had the sort of pleasure of photographing. So when I'm meeting somebody to do a portrait, the things that I'm always thinking about are that I want to capture the emotion, if you like, underneath that mask, that I want to tell that person's story, and that I want to illustrate a concept that perhaps we've agreed together beforehand, or maybe it's something that I've come up with and that they've liked the sound of, or something like that. So all my pictures really are about storytelling and also capturing emotion. So I'm going to go through some of my pictures with you and sort of tell you the ideas behind the pictures and how they came around. But also I'm then going to sort of touch briefly on different techniques that I use in order to create the portraits that you're seeing. So I'm going to go to this picture to start with, and this image is the before picture, if you like, of another picture I did called We Are Three. And prior to this, oh, excuse me, Jay, there's a pink square just came up on my screen. Do I need to turn that off?
We can't see it, so you should be fine. So don't worry about that. We can't see anything in
Okay.
the control panel, so you're okay there.
Okay. That's fine, I'll ignore that then. Okay, well, basically, with this picture, we'd arranged for these two girls to come to the studio and do a shoot together. And one of the things that struck me about them is that even though they weren't related, they both had almost identical eyes. And we were trying to think of ideas and concepts for the shoot that we were going to do with the two girls together. And I said to them, have you ever noticed that your eyes are virtually the same, even though you're not related? And I said that perhaps we somehow worked out how to merge the two of you together. We could come up with something quite strange, quite interesting to sort of highlight, to illustrate the fact that your features are very similar. And I sort of played around with ideas of how I was going to do this. Before every shoot that I do, I always sit with a drawing pad and sketch out different ideas and concepts, and I'll write down keywords and things like that. And I kept coming back to the eyes with these two girls. So we were looking for different ways that we could merge the two girls without it looking too sort of peculiar. And one of the girls picked this mask up while we were talking and sort of playing around with it, and she held it up against her eye. And I realised that if I put the other girl in the other eye, we could create almost like a third person. Just by merging their eyes in the centre. So if I go to the next screen, you can see what I came up with. And basically, the way I created this image, you can see by the catch light, I tend to use one key light when I'm taking the photographs. Very often I use a reflector underneath just so I can take out some of the shadow underneath the chin. But I do find by using a main key light quite high, it puts a nice shadow underneath the cheekbones and sort of really gives a nice look to these girls' faces. So that's how I lit it. I tend to desaturate the face quite a lot. You can see here that there's literally no colour in either of the girls' faces. And the reason that I do that is because it gives them a very sort of porcelain mask type quality. And this is something that I don't know. I just like it. I think probably the sort of thing about the mask and hiding behind the mask, it comes back in all of my pictures, and it's sort of becoming a bit of a theme that runs through a lot of my pictures. So yeah, I tend to sort of give them quite a porcelain look by taking out a lot of the colour in the skin and desaturating mainly the red tones of the skin. Excuse me. You can see as well all around here there are different types of brush strokes and markings which I do in pretty much all of my pictures. I make a lot of brushes, and that's something that I'll show you a bit later on. But basically, by creating brushes, I can add different marks in, and I can also take different marks out by using layers. So I use brushes all the time to sort of create these crazy patterns that you see on the pictures. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. So this is just a before and after here so that you can see how one image was created into the other. So we're starting out with a pretty standard beauty portrait that you would take in a studio, and then you're creating a piece of art just by allowing yourself to sort of experiment in Photoshop. The next picture I wanted to show you was my dear friend Bob. Bob came into the studio and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with Bob, and like I do with all the other people, I sat him down and we had a chat, and I basically make notes of the things that we talk about. And what struck me about Bob when he came in is that he had quite a sort of sad looking face, and automatically I assumed that Bob must be quite a sort of sad person, maybe quite miserable. But when I spoke to Bob and he started telling me about his time sort of working in London and all the people he knew and all all this sort of interesting stuff about him, I soon learned that although he had quite a sort of serious and almost sad exterior, inside he was a real clown and a joker and a very bubbly character. So whilst we were talking and he was saying to me, you know, I have got quite a serious exterior, but inside I'm a really happy character, I was writing all these notes down and sort of thinking about how I could use that as my concept to create a picture, a piece of art for Bob. So this photograph that I took here is the main image that I worked on. And again, you can see from the catchlight in his eyes that the lighting I use is very, very simple. It's basically, I think it was just a big what's it called, softbox up to the left, and then on the right I used a hair light just to accentuate a bit of light on his cheek and the back of his neck to sort of bring him out from the background. And to finish this portrait, I basically used my dodge and burn tools quite a bit in Photoshop. So you see here all the sort of dark creases in his skin. I've just used the dodge tool to just darken those up a little bit. And then I've used the highlight, the dodge tool to just bring out a few sort of light areas and maybe highlight the water in his eyes just to sort of create almost tears. And so I've just sort of made things a little bit more accentuated to how I photograph them. So this was the picture that I came up with for Bob, and this is called The Complexity of Bubbles. And I called it that because he did strike me as a bit of a clown, and Bubbles and being a bubbly character were words that I had written down on my pad when I was brainstorming with him before. So I wanted him to look like a bubbly character. And this was a very, very easy image to create because basically it was only a 4 or 5 layer image. Sometimes I work on hundreds of layers, but this one I'm pretty sure I only used about 4 or 5 layers. So I used the outer shell of his face, the miserable face, if you like, and then I took a photograph of him inside here, looking like a clown. So this was to sort of represent the happy, bubbly, clown-like character that he really is inside, even though his exterior shows him to be quite miserable. The bubbles are basically just to sort of, again, sort of bring in the words that he'd mentioned to me whilst talking, bubbly, that sort of thing. And as you can see in this one, I've literally sort of brought in a little bit of blue by using my blend modes in Photoshop, just to sort of tie in colours with the bow tie and to give it a nice sort of just to sort of bring in some continuity with the colours, really. So if I go to the next one, you can see how easy this one was, because it was basically the original image of Bob, and then I cut out his face so that it looked like his face had been cut in half. I took another image and I put it on his shoulder so that it looked like it was the part of the face that was taken off. That sounds weird, gosh. And then this was the happy Bob face that I put in there. And if you can see in the bubble, I've just basically used a section of this eye and spherized it in Photoshop. So it was a very easy image to create. Piecing all those together, we come up with this. And then again, I've just used my brushes to sort of make a few different marks here, just to sort of give it my own look, really. So that's how we created this one. This is Alana, and basically this shoot was all about illustrating Alana's character. And Alana is very gentle. She's almost like a sort of pixie fairy. She's very gentle, she's very soft, and she has very sort of beautiful soft coloured sort of tones in her skin. And all these things I write down when I'm meeting somebody, so that I get a feel for what they're like. And I ask them questions about themselves and what sort of colours they like. And also when I meet someone, very often I'll feel different colours. You hear people saying that they sort of pick up on auras and stuff like that. I don't do anything like that. I'm not magic, but I do sort of almost associate colours, different colours, people. And with Alana, I was thinking about very pretty colours, lots of soft blues and turquoises and lilacs, and so I decided that the image that I did of her had to incorporate all those colours. And also I was thinking about very swirly patterns and that sort of thing. And so whilst I'm sort of jotting down notes, I'm making marks on the paper and drawing different shapes. And often those shapes I will then use as brushes later on, the shapes that I've doodled with, to make brushes so that I can actually incorporate them back into the picture. And so this was the picture that I came up with Alana. Again, I used a butterfly sort of lighting effect on this picture. You can see down here there's the reflector. It just took out some of the shadow underneath her chin. And we just use a nice highlight just to make sure that her face is fully lit up. This was the picture that I came up with for Alana, and I call it Aquamarina. I love this picture because all the brushes are some of my favourite doodles that I've done. So I liked the fact that the markings I was making as I was talking to Alana are the markings that I then brought back into the picture. And a little bit later on I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'm going to move on swiftly. There you go, that's the before and after. Are there any questions, Jay?
Well, you're actually going about answering most of them as you go, which is amazing because obviously people were asking about bubbles. There was a lot. Bubbles is one of my favorite images of yours, but people were asking about things like the bow tie. Were they afterwards or before or afterwards, or did you create them? But of course, then you showed the before and after. So those are the kind of questions you're kind of answering as you're going, really. And obviously, you're talking about people are asking about the stories behind the images, and obviously you're doing that, so the inspiration. So that's a lot of the questions that are coming through. A couple of tacky questions. Obviously, we know we're working in layers in Photoshop. You're talking about the brushes you're going to show us later. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Are you using a tablet? Are you using a tablet particularly, Vicki?
Yeah, I use, oh gosh, I knew someone was going to ask me this question. It's very embarrassing. I use a Wacom Bamboo. It cost me 30 quid in Argos. So I don't go in for all the big techie, having to have the best equipment stuff. I reckon if you're an artist and you've got it, you can do it with anything. And so I spent 30 quid on my tablet.
I think we've got the same one, Vicki-Lea, so there's no issue with that at all. It's definitely the Bamboo or something like that. I've seen it, even though I can't use it, but Mark does. So it's the right tool for the job, isn't it? We've got a couple. Actually, you've started a string, a couple of questions, so let's get these done. So tablet we've done. How long does it? Oh, this was a question that's come up actually, but how long do you spend on an image, or does it vary?
It depends. The one that I did of bubbles took me about 25 minutes. But then the one that I've just showed you of Aquamarina with Alana, that one took me probably about 2 hours, so it was quite a lot longer. Yeah.
Okay, but that's a sort of general. You know, we're not talking days or anything like that. Sort of.
Oh no, when I first started, I used to take about 6 hours to do one edit, but I soon realised as I got more customers that I couldn't really do that. So I've had to speed up as I've got more popular. So.
Excellent. Well, we're getting quite a few Photoshop questions, and because we did do a test though, because we know that Photoshop can drain on webinars, so we weren't really going to look at Photoshop stuff. But obviously, you're talking about Photoshop. So, are we using typically things like the Gaussian blurs to get sort of the porcelain effect, or do you have a good tip for the porcelain effect on the face?
Yeah, I tend to use frequency separation. I've got a really basic and simple technique that I use for that, so I'm quite happy to show everybody on Photoshop how to do that in a minute if you like. It's very, very straightforward. I know there's a lot of really complicated ways of doing frequency separation, and there's some that are probably much more effective than the way I do it, but I've learned a really easy way of doing that, so I'm quite happy to share that.
Let's leave the Photoshop till the last bit then, because I say sometimes it gives us a few techie problems on the webinar. So we'll certainly have we're not experiencing any problems. So as long as we've got everything else shut down, it should be good. So the last question for now, before we carry on, with regards to the people that you're working with, are they paid models, or are they friends, or are they a bit of both?
Most of them, well, the ones that I'm showing you tonight, the majority of the girls are my friends actually, and I never pay models. I've got a very basic rule: if I get paid, they get paid. So if I get paid for a job, then I'll pay the models. But if it's something for, say, I don't know, an editorial or something like this, a webinar, then they don't get paid. But most of them are my friends that you'll see in these. The reason that these are all these people in the ones that you're seeing tonight are actually my friends is because a lot of the customers that I have, the images that I produce for them tell their story, and they're very, very personal to them. And so most of my customers' images that I actually create, I don't show in public. So
No,
these ones that you'll see, yeah, these ones you'll see tonight, they're mostly are my friends.
excellent. One last question before we move on. Let's just come in
Yeah.
because I'm not really big on Photoshop, so you can just go yes or no, Jay. Do you use Corral brushes in Photoshop by any chance?
I use a massive combination of brushes. I don't know what Corral brushes are. Is that? Oh yeah, there's I have got Corral, but I never use it, so no. But you can download brushes from anywhere. If you Google brushes, you can download millions. But in order to make a picture really, really personal to you and to make it actually a one-off that people can't copy, it's best to design your own brushes. It's very, very easy to do. So I tend to try and do that wherever possible.
Perfect. So all back to you, love.
Okay, just Jay, just on the talking about frequency separation, rather than show it on Photoshop, because like you said, it might slow things down. I have done a YouTube video on how to do frequency separation.
Perfect.
So if anybody wants to know how to do it, they can click onto that, and they can sort of stop and start it as they go and learn how to do it. So
Excellent. Is
that's on.
the easiest way to find that?
If you just Google my name and if you go onto YouTube and just put my name and frequency separation, it comes up straight away.
Perfect. Excellent. I'll post. We can always chase that up with a link from the Facebook page tomorrow as well if people want to do that.
Okay, cool.
Excellent. All yours,
Okay,
love.
thank you. Okay, so this picture is a fashion image that I was working on. I don't do a lot of fashion commissions, but occasionally I'll do different sort of concepts. This one, basically I wanted to do a fashion image about a hat, and I wanted it to be quite dark, and I wanted it to be quite mysterious. So immediately when I took this photograph in the studio, I desaturated pretty much everything in the image except her lips, so that we had a little bit of colour going on in there. And if you look closely, you can see that there is a little bit of yellow left in her hair. So it's not completely black and white, but I've left sort of the odd tint of colour. And I knew that this image was going to be very dark. So I'm going to go quickly to the actual image. This is it. As you can see, the hat is made out of brush strokes. So this image is a really good illustration of how you can almost create the idea of something being there without actually having it there. The model was a bit alarmed that I'd taken her eye out of the picture, but even so, I think it works quite nicely because you get a feel of a hat being there, a sort of an accessory there, but without it actually being there. So these brush strokes were just put in, and I think this image I probably worked on about 50 layers. So some of my images I'm working on a lot of different layers in order to create all these different brush strokes. So yeah, this fashion image, it was all about hats, but there wasn't even a hat there. So that was what the concept was all about. So there you can see the before and after, and it is actually my favourite image, so that's that one, and that one's called Nora. Okay, this I was doing an editorial for a magazine, and basically this girl came in. The concept behind the images that you're about to see was behind every great man, and we decided that we were going to create a sort of really cool Mrs. Christmas. And Paige, this model, came into the studio, and I have an absolutely fantastic stylist. I can't big her up enough. Her name is Estelle Cole, and she's on my wavelength. So if you're looking for doing something a bit different, you need to find yourself a really decent stylist, and Estelle Cole, she certainly fits the bill for me. Anyway, this girl Paige came in, and Estelle said to me, you know, what we're looking at to do, and I said that I wanted to create a Christmas feel, but I wanted to keep her quite sort of almost sci-fi, because I wanted it to be more up to date. I didn't want it to be some sort of old stuffy Mrs. Christmas, you know, sort of knitting in a corner with a pinny on. I wanted my Miss Mrs. Christmas to be wearing a silver shiny suit and to have sort of reindeer antlers, if you like, and I just wanted her to be much more modern. And so this is the image, well, this is the concept that Estelle created. Paige had amazing dreadlocks, which she deliberately dyed sort of bluey colours in order to do the shoot. And Estelle sort of wrapped all these dreadlocks around these antler shapes that we created with twigs and a bit of silver sort of spray, and we sort of put like different crystals and things all over her just to give her a bit of glimmer and to make her look a bit Christmassy. And obviously the blues that we had in the hair we incorporated into the lips, and the silver foil jumpsuit I think I got for 10 quid from eBay, so I'm always looking for something a little bit strange on eBay. It's amazing what you can find on there. So this was the look that we created, and actually this picture hasn't been edited at all. This was the image of what we came up with. So let me flick over to the next one. So this was Mrs. Christmas. This is the image that I came up with for Paige, and you can see that what I've done is really sort of accentuated the crystals. I've used some of the dreadlocks and I've taken out quite a lot of the hair because I wanted to sort of bring in some almost like sci-fi shapes just using brushes, and this is what I've done. I've kept quite a lot of light in the background because I wanted to sort of almost make it feel like she was coming from somewhere. To me, this image, it was about making her look almost sort of a little bit sort of spacey. She could almost be a sort of Princess Leia type character, someone from sort of that kind of sort of Star Wars generation character, that kind of thing. I wanted her to be more sort of sci-fi as opposed to tacky Christmassy. And brushes, again, I've used some sort of spirographics brushes, and I've used some butterfly wings, all sorts of different splodges. Brushes you can either use to put in marks or you can take out marks. So I've used them to put in this occasion. You can see that I've cut out her face to make her look mask-like, and again, like I said before, I've taken all the colour out of her face to give her this porcelain look, and then I've used a frequency separation to really smooth it over and to make it look really soft. And I know all the purists amongst you will be seething at that, because taking out all the detail of someone's face is frowned upon, but actually if you go in really closely you can still see the texture of her face, because I don't really want to take everything away. So so that's what we did here, and this image was called Crystals. Okay, I mentioned quickly that I often sketch before I start. There are sort of 7 stages that I go through with every single image, if you like. The first one is a sort of, it's almost like an interview process. When I meet somebody, I want to get to the character behind their face, and I want to understand them a bit, and I want to learn about them. So I'm asking them questions, and I'm being empathetic so that I'm not digging too deeply, but I'm getting to know the character in front of me every single time I meet somebody. And with that, the next stage is that I'm then exploring creativity. So I'm writing down all these words and I'm doodling these kind of shapes. I'm putting down bits of colour, and I'm literally brainstorming whilst I'm talking to people and sort of coming up with different creative ideas so that I know where I'm going to then take the image to. And then the next stage is shooting for the concept. For every image I do, I'm actually shooting for the specific image that I'm coming up with whilst I'm planning with them. The next thing I need to do is create the brushes. So that will be the next stage. I need to create the brushes, and I need to have everything I need in order to create one of my images. The next stage that I go into is polishing up the picture. So I'm looking to do frequency separation, smooth the skin, take out any little things that aren't sort of working for me, that sort of thing. The next stage would be the edit, and then the next stage would be going on to sort of presentation and how I print it and that sort of thing, or what I use to promote my work. And then lastly, the sort of delivery of the image, and how the customer receives it. So I'm going to go through those stages with you now, and this is just a classic example of me exploring creativity and just writing things down. And you can see here this picture was again with Paige for the Christmas pictures that we were doing, and I was just writing down things like baubles and blues and Mrs. Christmas, and I wrote down symmetry because we were talking about different shapes, and I kept thinking about symmetrical shapes while we were talking, and I was sort of drawing more patterns that I thought maybe I'd use as brushes. And so this is a classic example of the kind of sort of brainstorming piece of paper that I come up with before all my shoots. Okay, that's out of sequence, so bear with me. So that was the picture I came up with those sketches you saw, and you can see that I've incorporated little baubles. I've tried to keep a symmetry going by just using one half of the face and flipping it over. I've got sort of little bits and bobs that look like Christmas decorations, and I've basically kept the colours really cool tones, like to keep a nice Christmas feel. And you can see I've introduced little sparkly glittery lights everywhere so that we kept the momentum of Mrs. Christmas going through this image. Okay. This image here was for a picture I did called The Demise of Ronald McDonald. And this guy came into the studio and we wanted to illustrate a theme which was gluttony. So I got him to eat this Victoria sandwich in the most disgusting way in front of me, and that was the picture that I came up with. And this was the picture I came up with afterwards. Now, this image was really, really simple to use, and I'll show you why with this one. Yeah. Basically, I got a piece of paper, and I'm a big fan of rotoring pens. I don't know if any of you use them, but when you buy a rotoring pen, it comes with a black cartridge, which is a bit like a pen nib on the end of it. And I use it to either sort of draw marks, or I just squeeze it and make splashes, and I use it all the time for making different brushes. And I was thinking about mark making when I was doing this picture, and just sort of throwing ink down onto a piece of paper whilst we were talking. And this was the illustration, if you like, that I came up with. And when I showed him it, we sort of like lined it up with a picture that we took, and I then proceeded to just use adjustment layers to cut out different parts of the picture so that his face started showing through the illustration. And then on top of that, you can see I've started introducing like bits of colour just by using brushes. And again here I've sort of put splodges in and used my brushes to sort of make more marks for that one. So again, exploring your creativity. Not all of my doodles are done in 5 minutes while I'm talking to the people before the shoot. A lot of the time I spend doodling at home, and this piece of art here, you see, is something that I just sat sort of doodling whilst I'm watching telly at home. And I came up with this, and from time to time someone will come into the studio and they're waiting for me to come up with something amazing, and I haven't got any ideas, so it's really handy to have a pad of illustrations that I've got. I can then sort of dig out when I haven't got any other ideas, and I can merge them quite simply with a picture of the person to create a nice piece of art. So if you're good at doodling, or I'm a really big fan of pen and ink, as you can see, anything that you can create you can use as a layer and overlay onto one of your photographs, and you can come up with something sort of quite magical. So this was the illustration that I did. And this was a photograph I took of Emma when she came in the studio. And because we didn't really have any ideas, we just took a selection of photographs, all different types of things really. So I did a few portrait shots. Here you can see I did a boudoir shoot. And yeah, we did a couple of fashion portraits. So we did a variety of things, and then afterwards I sort of looked through them and decided what would work with my illustration that I'd done, overlaid them, and this was what I came up with. So it's a good example of how you can make something that looks quite technical in just 2 layers. I simply layered over my illustration on top of the picture of Emma, and I just changed my blend modes in Photoshop to, I think it was different, something like that, and this was what I came up with. So it's just the most simple thing to do, 2 layers, and took me probably less than 5 minutes to create. Again, this is just an example of my doodling. This was a picture that I doodled while I was watching the Kardashians, and I'm not a fan of the Kardashians. It was the first time I'd ever seen it, and I got a bit bored, so I started illustrating, and this was what I came up with. And I remembered a picture that I'd taken of my friend Monica, and thought that actually I could probably sort of see a few things that I could do to sort of merge those two pictures. So this was what I came up with, and all I did was cut out the eyes, the shoulder and the arm, and have Monica behind it, and you can see sort of this is where she is. And then I literally started adding different colour tones to different parts of my illustration. Excuse me. Here you can see I've brought through one of Monica's eyes, and here as well. And so I've just added a few little extra details so that it's a bit more interesting when people have a look. They sort of find these little parts to the picture that make them look and want to see more. You can see another eye here. And then over the top of it all, you can see there's sort of like a sort of transparent layer with holes in it. And that was just a white layer that I put over the top, cut some holes out, and then I just changed the blending tone on it, the blending mode, and it just created a nice soft sort of colourful effect. So again, this image, which looks massively technical, probably took me less than 5 minutes to create, if you don't include the actual drawing, because I think the doodle probably took me about an hour. So. Okay, so some people aren't very good at drawing, so you might think, well, I can't draw, so how am I going to create these kind of images? You don't have to be able to draw. There are loads of different things that you can use to create interesting patterns and different sort of shapes and colours and ideas. And this is a fractal program. I basically was Googling fractals, and I found this free program that if you write in a few coordinates, it comes up with all these amazing different fractals. And it was free, and it was great fun to play with. And as I was playing around, I came up with this shape, and I was thinking as I was looking at it that it looked like the side of a face. And I had a picture that I wanted to sort of use, and I thought if I cut it in half, this could actually be the half of a face here, with this being maybe a space for the eye, a space for the nose, space for the mouth, and this could be the neck. So with that in mind, I then took my picture of my friend Hannah, which was this one here, and I overlaid the two images. So this was the effect that I got. And the fractal layer that I put on top of the picture, I just again changed the blend mode in Photoshop to, I think it was subtract. It may well have been different, but I just play around with those all the time to see what looks best. And this was what I came up with, and I was really pleased with it because it looked very tribal, but I did want it to be a full face. So I think if I go back, there you go. Just by flipping it over, I've then created this really sort of tribal looking mask type face. And all I did was overlay 2 layers, and again that picture took me less than 5 minutes to create. So you don't have to be able to draw to create these kind of pieces of art. All you need to do is have ideas and experiment and try different ways of being creative, because pretty much anything that you can come up with, if you put it on top of your model and play with your blending modes in Photoshop, you're going to create something amazing. Again, another sketch that I did. This time I already had a photograph that I'd taken, and I wanted to sort of work around that. So this was the sketch that I did around a picture of my friend Rosie, and this was the image that I created. And like the one that I showed you before, I just cut out sections. So I cut out the arm, I cut out the face and the shoulder, and down here the arm, and I literally just then put in colour using blending modes onto the actual pattern layer. and again that one took me about 10 minutes. Am I rambling, Jay? Have you got any questions?
No, we do have some questions, and actually quite a perfect timing for the one that I was going to ask you, because we've been talking about
Okay.
sort of the sketches and the doodles, and obviously we can see that you're doing those by hand in a sketch pad.
Yeah.
So are you ultimately
Yeah.
then taking the image and scanning that into your computer and using it there?
Yeah, well, I used to use a scanner, but my scanner's broke, so now I'm photographing the image and then just putting it straight into my computer.
So brilliant. Do you ever actually doodle straight onto the computer with your tablet, or is it typically drawn hand-free first?
I, I do occasionally, but I've got to be honest that I really enjoy drawing. It's really relaxing for me. It's something that I do. Actually, I've always got a pad on me. I'm always drawing, and so because I sort of tend to do that while I'm sat watching telly or doing something else, I would say that more of my pictures are done from images that I've drawn by hand.
Brill. Um, do you have a favourite sharpening technique in Photoshop?
I use Camera Raw quite a lot. It's very simple. But no, I don't really sharpen everything that much. I don't like over-sharpened images. I can't bear that sort of white glow you get, so I tend not to sharpen things too much. And also, I want things to look quite soft, and sometimes if you make them look too sharp, you get really sort of jaggedy, sharp edges. So I kind of shy away from sharpening a little bit.
This was quite a nice question. Eyes seem to play an important part in your images. Is this because they see past the mask?
Eyes are a big deal for me. Eyes, I definitely, you've heard eyes are the window to the soul, and I think that's really true. You can tell a lot about somebody by the way they communicate with their eyes, and you can see past what they're telling you by looking into their eyes. You can tell a lot from a person about their eyes. So yeah, I'm the eyes. Well, when I show you an edit I'm going to do in a minute, you'll see that I do zoom in and I do edit the edit. I do edit the eyes a little bit for most of my pictures so that they pop slightly and so that you are drawn into them. Because I do think that whatever portrait you look at, the eyes are usually the first thing you're going to sort of engage with.
Brill. Where are we? There we go. So, I just asked you that one. What is your favourite, or do you have a favourite blend mode, or is it a case of just working through them like you've mentioned to find the right one for the right image?
I seem to use subtract quite a lot and different, but I do flick through them quite a bit because it's quite sometimes you can get a really unusual effect by sort of playing around with those. And I've also been known to sort of double up the layout and use 2 or 3 blending modes on top of each other, and that creates even more interesting effects. So I play with the blending modes probably more than I play with anything else in Photoshop.
Do you, I thought I'd muted then, sorry. Do you use displacement maps?
No, I don't even know what they are.
There we go. Somebody's mentioned, and that's a good point actually. So obviously, some of the areas that you've been, especially with your doodles that you're colouring in, is very intricate. Is that just by zooming into the image? You're using quite a big file size in the first place?
I tend to, yeah, I do work on 16-bit most of the time, usually because when I go into frequency separation, I will change the image to 16-bit so that I don't get any banding in the colours, and the computer will recognise more colours in 16-bit. So I tend to work on quite big images, and I also save the images as TIFF files because I don't lose anything in them then. So they are quite big files, yeah.
That was actually, we had that question come through quite a few times in the registration actually, what sort of file sizes you're working with, so answered that there, brilliant.
Yeah.
Interesting, even though actually I'm not even certain, how often do you do your own self-portrait with your work?
Never. I've done one. I've done one where I had I sort of did one a bit tongue-in-cheek with a snail crawling up my arm because I am a bit known to be a bit slow in getting back to people. But no, I don't take pictures of myself.
Okay, so the last one for now.
I avoid that.
The last one for now before we move on, we're going back to the Mrs. Christmas image, the one
Yeah,
which is the full face one with the baubles and everything you showed us the design on.
yeah.
Somebody's asked, the surrounding color light surrounding is brilliant. Is this done via the blend modes and is it layered up so that the sort of the surrounding of the image?
Um, Partly. I often play around with my lights in the studio, creating different weird effects by using different strange things. I've been known to stick like sweet wrappers on my lights to sort of see what effects I get for the light going through them, things like that. And I'd been playing around with a sort of very opaque milk carton that I'd ripped open and put over one of my lights, and then I'd had some sparkly sort of twinkly lights in the background, and I got this really nice sort of bokeh misty effect. And I used that in the background of that image, and then I blended it into using my blending modes into a colour layer that I put over it. So I really, yeah, I kind of experiment quite a lot with sort of weird and alternative lighting that I've made myself, and that was a bit of a result of that.
Excellent, brilliant. I'm quite aware of the time, so I know we've got some stuff to go through.
Yeah.
We've answered the core of the questions, so if we crack on, obviously
Okay.
we're aiming for the hour, but obviously if you're happy to stay with us, we're happy to stay online with you, obviously. So,
Yeah, no
but the
worries.
core of the questions we've answered, so you crack on there, love, and I'll keep you posted.
Okay, lovely. Right, well, I was going to show you how to make brushes now, and this I think I showed you previously, the aquamarina picture. This was the brushes that I designed for that picture. So let's move on. These were just done, by the way, by using a 0.35 rotary pen nib, and I just literally sat and doodled these whilst I was probably watching Coronation Street or something. Okay, so we've talked about how you can mark make. So you can download programs that make fractals, or you can draw, or you can paint, or you can splash ink onto a page. There's loads of ways that you can do mark making. Now I'm fully aware that there are loads of people who cannot draw to save their lives. So also we now have the wonders of iPads that have hundreds and hundreds of different artistic and sort of creative programs that you can download, and you can sort of make brushes doing it that way. So this is my iPad, and I had a picture of a shell, a very tiny piece of shell, and using just some program or another, like an art draw program on the iPad that I downloaded. It was a free app. I used the shell to draw to create different shapes. And these were the kind of shapes I was making whilst drawing. And I was thinking that it kind of looked like a sort of ammonite, these sort of fossils that you found in rocks. So I decided to go with that. And I did loads of different doodles with these, and I saved them, as you can see, onto different pages in my iPad. In my iPad, I literally have thousands of just squiggles that I've made, which all could be used as brushes. So that's sort of what they look like. So that's just to give you an idea. So then what I did was I took some of these pages of squiggles that I'd done, and I load them up into my computer. I use a PC, and I save them at 300 dpi, these pages, into my folder called brushes. And at any point in the future, if I need an ammonite brush, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make a brush from one of these. So these are all the different ones that I came up with. Okay, and here you can see what I do. Once I've loaded them all into Photoshop, then I just save the brushes into a folder so that I can then reload those and use them whenever I need them. And when they're saved as an ABR file, I think it is, and that's basically the Photoshop recognized sort of file. It's an ABR, so that's how I do that. Now I was gonna show you how to do frequency separation, but I don't think we've got time. And like I said to Jay, we basically I have done a YouTube video of that. So if you want to learn about frequency separation, you can check that out. But basically all it is separating the skin so that you've got one layer which is textures and one layer that is colours, and you can work on either one of those layers without actually affecting the other. So it's great if you want to sort of blend the colour so that you get a really smooth colour palette on a face, because you can still leave the textures there, and vice versa, you can sort of smooth out the texture and keep all the colours. So it's a great way of sort of tidying up a face before you edit. So this was the picture that I'm going to just talk you through and edit very quickly. This was a picture that I'd taken of Sarah, and I quite like this picture. There's a few things wrong with it. You know, there's some chicken wires sticking out of her hair there, and there's the old blemish and what have you. So I zoomed into Sarah's face, and I did the frequency separation technique, which you can see in my YouTube video, and this was the nice smooth sort of finish that we had. As you can see, it's sort of all ready to sort of go ahead and edit. So this was my starting point with the image that I'm about to show you. So the first thing that I do when I'm building up one of my pictures and I'm editing is I go in, I zoom in nice and close, and I get rid of any of the little bits and bobs that I don't want. So the first thing that sort of jumped out at me was the chicken wire, so I went in and took those out. Bear with me a second. The other thing I'm thinking about all the time is backgrounds, and as I was saying about brushes, anything can be a potential brush. So can anything be a potential background or texture. And this is just basically a tile, granite tile in my kitchen that I took a photo of, which has got a nice texture. It's quite grainy, so I thought that'll do. That's the background. So this was the picture I took, and I basically put a little bit of colour onto it. I literally put a colour of orange over the top of it and changed the blending mode to different, and this was the effect I got. So that was the background that I created. So as you can see, the first thing I've done is I've basically made a layer, and I can't actually see. Bear with me one second. I'm just moving my box on my screen out the way so I can see what I'm doing. That's it. Okay, so what I've done is I've put the background layer over my original layer. Then I've made a second layer of the background up here, and I've called it face. And the first thing I've done is I've literally cut out a mask, if you like, of Sarah's face. And as you can see, I've got a sort of bevel emboss edge to it so that it really looks like a mask. And so this is my starting point, basically. Bear with me, my computer's going slow. And you mentioned the eyes before. You can see that I've zoomed into the eye. One of the things that I do is make sure that the catch light is really strong. That really sort of accentuates the eyes. I take out any kind of, you get some sort of reddy veins in the eyes, and maybe lighten the white of the eyes just very, very slightly. And just by doing those things, the eyes really sort of pop out, and it draws your attention to the eyes in the picture. So here you can see that I've used my ammonite brushes, and I've basically created another layer which I've put in between my background and my mask. And here you can see that I've used the brushes and just made lots of marks to sort of create a kind of hairstyle effect. And I've sort of done those quite randomly using all the different brush marks that I made on my iPad. Here you can see I've made another layer which I've put over the mask, and that allows me to make brush marks over the top of the girl's face. So this is what I've done to sort of make the hair, if you like. Okay, here again you can see that I've done what I was mentioning before. I've sort of desaturated, if you like, a lot of the colour in the face. I've also put in a red sort of glow in the background so that it lifts the mask off of the face and gives a bit more definition, so you get a little bit more depth. Also, by changing the blending modes, you're going to allow colour through the different marks that you've made with your brushes. So here you can see some of the sort of red glow coming through, and it just sort of makes things look a little bit more varied, so that they're not all really flat and black. So we've used a sort of glow for that. Here you can see again I've put a bit more of a glow. All I've done is I've made another layer. Can you see just there? It's just an orange colour, and I've changed the blending mode here to colour dodge. And what colour dodge does is it gives you this nice sort of bright glow, but also when overlapped with skin, it sort of gives a glow as though the sort of light or sunshine or whatever it is hitting her face. So the colour dodge is great for doing that if you want to sort of incorporate some of the colour behind into the edge of the face. Now obviously whenever you add light, you need to also add dark, because wherever there's light there's going to be a shadow on the opposite direction. So with that in mind, you can see here I've basically used my dodge tool and a big soft brush to just sort of darken down one side of the face. And I've darkened the sort of edge of her eye here as well, so that it just sort of darkens things a bit, and it lifts her off the page because you've got the light and dark. And again, I've put some more yellow in. Again, it's sort of coming through the brushes just here, so you're getting a variety of colour. And then finally, what I always do with all of my different portraits is I'll go into Camera Raw. I sort of do a bit of finishing. I think I mentioned earlier that I go into Camera Raw. I don't really know how to use anything other than Photoshop, so Camera Raw is definitely my first choice for tweaking things. And all I've done is I've brought the blacks down a little bit so that they look a bit harsher against the light colours behind. I've brought the whites up a little bit, so again her eyes are really popping, and also I've slid the clarity along, because you get that more sort of three-dimensional HDR effect if you change the clarity a little bit. So just by doing those things, you've lifted your image right off the page. And so that was the final image. So that is just a sort of quick walkthrough, if you like, of how I do my edits. Again, with the one that we saw of Alana earlier, you can see here that this was the sort of face part of the image that I wanted to use. Those were the brushes that I created. And all I did was I cut out her face, I made a sort of mask effect, and with this image I desaturated the whole face and decided to put in colour afterwards, just so that I had complete control of what colours were going to be used in the image. And you can see here there's a bit of blue in the cheekbone, and there's a bit of blue on the neck, and I'm just sort of creating a nice soft glow. You can see here that all the brushes that I've used are all the ones that you saw a moment ago. Let me just go back to that one, excuse me. By working on different layers, you can really have absolute control on these brushes. So in the background, if you look, you can see that I've got some dark brushes, which is again starting to sort of form a hairstyle, if you like. And then on top of that, I've created sort of light blue colour splashes and more of these sort of pattern brushes. And then again, I've created another layer, and you can see here with the brushes, I've put a slight bevel emboss on them so that they're looking a little bit three-dimensional. And I've also gradiented colour on them, so you've got the sort of colour from the face running through blues and running into greys, so you're getting some really interesting colours coming through. And if you work these layers on the same layer as the face using the bevel emboss, you can create sort of nice patterns actually coming off of the face. So this is how I'm doing this. Here you can see loads of brushes. This was a bit later on. Like I said, this one took me a few hours to do. I've incorporated brushes of wings. I've used sort of rag effect blotches in the background. And also, again, I've put a really bright light behind Alana so that it really lifts her out of the page. And also you can see that I've put colour back into her eyes, and I've matched them up with the colours of the sort of centre of the flower and a few of my brushes. So I'm sort of keeping continuity by tying in different colours from different areas of the picture. So that's how I create the images. Just quickly before I finish, the next thing obviously is selling you and selling your images. One of the tips I would give everybody is to have a portfolio. There's something quite magical about being able to sort of pass your pictures to somebody and for them to turn the pages and feel the paper and hold it. It doesn't matter who you show a picture to on a screen. If they see the picture in front of them and they can hold it, it will sell the picture. And I would say that nearly everybody that comes here into my studio that books a shoot with me, as soon as they start feeling the pictures that I do and turning the pages and holding them, it almost sells them the dream, if you like. It sort of they can start understanding what they're going to be able to take away from this shoot with them. And so having a portfolio, I think, is really, really important as an artist, because there's something magical about printed pictures. Social media, I can't sell enough. It doesn't. You never know who's looking. I posted a couple of pictures of my children's portraiture. I'm a big fan of kids being photographed through play, as opposed to sort of posing, sitting, being told to be quiet and look pretty. And I did some pictures like that, and I posted them on Facebook, and it was picked up on by Yahoo over in America, and they did an interview with me, and then the Chinese picked up on it. Before you know it, I'd had 300,000 hits, and I gained a celebrity badge on Facebook. So that all happened within a week. So you never know who's looking. If you want your work to sort of extend out there, social media is one of the best ways to do that. Again, competitions. I enter any competition going because I value any feedback that I can get on my work, and definitely, I mean, for me, I enter the Photographers Academy competitions. I enter the SWP monthly competition. I love that competition, and if I don't get anywhere next month, I'm going to try that bit harder to get that gold, because it makes me push myself. And there's nothing wrong with being a bit competitive, because it makes you sort of like try that little bit harder. And networking, again, I go to all the photographic things that happen, and I get involved with the different sort of conventions and stuff. So selling you, I think, is really important, because it's all very well to make these pretty pictures, but predominantly we need to put food on the table for our families. So I need to make some money. So don't be afraid to sell yourself, and have some confidence in what you do. And lastly, the presentation of your images. Basically, I'm an ambassador for Permajet, and I think get the right papers, print your images, and sell them. And that's it. I can hear you, Jay. Are we over?
No,
time?
we're fine. We've run over, but everybody stayed with us. There's no problem with that. And you just answered
Okay.
the first question that I was going to ask you. Was one of the questions
Well,
was
I'm
asked.
finished now.
Excellent. Well, you're not going anywhere,
I'm
because
finished.
we've got a list
No.
of questions for you, and I've got
Okay, that's
I've got a surprise for you as well.
okay.
So printing then, obviously, and the presentation. Do you have a
Yeah.
preferred paper? Even though you've said Permajet, do you have a preferred paper that you present with, or do you use
Yeah.
various papers from Permajet?
Yeah, I've pretty much tried everything. For me, I use titanium Permajet paper, and it's not just because I'm an ambassador for Permajet, but because I use really, really sort of vibrant colours, and also very dark blacks. One of the best things about titanium paper is that it keeps your blacks true, but also really brings out the colour. And so for working in this kind of an image, I haven't ever found any paper that comes close to titanium, so that's the one that I would definitely recommend.
Perfect. Answered that. Brilliant. How often do you calibrate your monitor?
I'm really bad. I don't do it. My husband does it for me, and I think he did it about a year ago.
Okay, so once a month from now on then, Vicky.
Yeah, someone better show me how to do
We'll sort
it.
that. We'll sort that out. There's loads of videos. Photography Academy. You can go and watch one.
Is that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Um, like, so I'm going through. Okay, so you talked about the brushes. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
obviously we didn't get the luxury of being able to show them tonight, but obviously you showed them that you
Yeah.
scanned the image and you saved
Yeah.
that within a brushes folder on your PC.
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
link that to your Photoshop?
Okay. Right. I'm not going to go into Photoshop and do a whole presentation, so don't panic. But can you see my Photoshop screen there,
I
Joe?
can. Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Okay. All you do is you go. Let's just open an image. So we've got that picture there of Paula. Okay. So I'm going to make Paula into a brush. This is how easy it is. All you do is you draw around whatever it is that you want to be a brush. You go into Edit and you go to Define Brush Preset. Give it a name. We'll call that brush Paula and press OK. And there you go. She's now a brush. So if I go to my brushes, that you can see there's Paula and she is a brush. So that is how easy it is to make a brush. There's no excuses to download brushes. You can make your own brushes. So just remember, go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and that's how you make a brush.
Perfect. Simple as that. There we go. God, we should have had you on a lot earlier doing that. Brilliant. Oh, the bevel, when we were looking at the last image, when you were going through the edit process, which was brilliant, and you showed
Yeah.
obviously cutting out the face to make it look like a beveled edge, to make it really
Yeah.
pop out. Again, is that in the masking technique, or was that a brush tool? I missed that.
Okay, so again, it's very easy. You just go into Layer. Actually, I don't, if I just make another layer, so bear with me 1 second, because this is quite easy to show you. So if we make another layer there, and let's make a shape of Paula again. So we've done a picture there. If I hold on 1 moment, I'm just going to go over that a bit because otherwise you can't see it. So let's change that and do that again. Bear with me. Yeah, no, Photoshop's going really slow. Hold on 1 minute. Is that going to stop? Doesn't seem to, hold on. Right, we're in business. So we're going to make another layer. So there is Paula. Now, in order to bevel and emboss that, we go to Layer, Layer Style, Bevel Emboss. And then it brings up all different options how to bevel and emboss it. So you can see here, and there is an inner bevel selected, and you get that weird kind of beveled effect. If I change it here to emboss, you can see you've got that sort of different shape there again. So just by playing around with that, you're going to get different sort of styles of embossing. I tend to just use emboss, but there you go. Okay.
Perfect. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to rob the screen back a second.
Okay.
So they'll be having my screen, so that should be coming back now. Before,
Okay.
I've got a surprise that we're going to do in a second, and a few things just to tell
Right.
people about. But just before we do sort of finish the official part of the webinar, I want to just give you some of the things that have been coming through in the panel. Thank you for tonight. I've really got the creative bug again now. I've lost my way in photography, and you've really inspired me. These are words. This is nothing to do with me, love. This is all the words from the people that have been online
Great.
with us tonight. Very impressive. Thank you for sharing your techniques with us. Just general statement here, overwhelmed. Love the images. Almost like beautiful 3D tattoo portraits. So that was fantastic. Inspirational talk, really talented artist, a great presentation. Many, many thanks for doing it for us. Brilliant mind, awesome stuff. Absolutely love it. Thank you, Vicky. Truly an artist of today. Love the way you work and so informative. It's nice that you're prepared to share where some people aren't. Thank you, Vicky. You are truly an artist today. Oh, you just repeated that twice, sorry. And it's just never ending now. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So